From Wood TV, this is 24-Hour News 8 at 7.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marley Ginter.
And I'm Brian Sterling. Tonight at 7, marijuana in Michigan. Recreational pot's now been legal for 19 hours in the state, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to light up in public.
Well, you've sent in your questions about pot, and tonight we're going to answer some of the biggest ones. So let's start with the basics. Just like with alcohol, marijuana is only legal for people 21 and older. When it comes to having it, you can only carry up to 2.5 ounces of it and keep 10 ounces at home.
And don't expect to walk into a store this weekend and pick some up. The state is still working out how to license recreational marijuana sales. Basically, it means that you still can't legally sell or buy pot. In fact, we likely won't see recreational marijuana businesses here in Michigan until sometime in 2020.
Now, while Michigan is the first state in the Midwest to legalize pot for recreational use, we're actually the 10th state to vote yes on pot. The first was Colorado. Local lawmakers and law enforcement had quite the daunting task of being the first ones to take on this massive new industry. We're talking about open growing, selling, and now regulating. I was able to talk with the former executive director of Colorado's Department of Revenue, Barbara Broll. At the time, she was pinned with regulating the industry. So I asked her everything from what went wrong to what went right and what Michigan should expect. What would be your warnings to Michigan?
The very first one is going to be, this is going to take longer than you think to implement. It's going to cost more than you think to implement, and it's going to be harder to implement. So what you really want to do is make sure that you are building a good enforcement organization. And it is enforcement. It's not only regulatory compliance, it's also enforcement.
Now, Broll told me one thing Colorado leaders learned very quickly was the importance of getting all community leaders in on the discussion, educated and trained, everyone from school leaders, local law enforcement, even homeowner associations.
Here in Michigan, you no longer need a medical card to smoke marijuana, but if you rent your home or apartment, don't light up just yet. Smoking weed in rental properties could result in fines or even eviction. 24-Hour News 8's Marvis Herring is finding out what rights renters and landlords have when it comes to cannabis.
Good evening. We talked to West Michigan leasing companies and legal experts who made it clear that while you may be able to store 10 ounces of marijuana in your home, landlords hold the right to ban you from smoking it or growing plants. Rockford Construction and Land & Company own several rental properties in West Michigan. Both say you won't be able to smoke marijuana if you sign one of their leasing agreements.
If you're leasing property or renting property, you're at the whim and control of whatever the terms of your lease are that may very well prohibit some of these activities.
Ronald Reddick is an experienced attorney at Micah Myers in Grand Rapids. Though Proposal 1 passed, he explained that landlords can ban marijuana-related activities like smoking.
There's no reason to treat marijuana smoke any different than tobacco smoke with regards to the damage it can potentially create to a leased premises or the fire risk of it.
It's an activity that could detrimentally affect the value of the property.
We also sat down with Michelle McLean, a partner at a law firm in Granville, who echoed Reddick's assessment of the new pot law.
Smoking leaves behind a smell and odor and discoloration, and it travels through the air and can affect other people who may be in the apartment next door. Damage
to property is a key factor in what things landlords can restrict. McLean believes you could see growing restrictions. She recalled homes deemed inhabitable after illegal grow operations left behind black mold and damage. But your right to have weed or consume it by means other than smoking is something landlords can't take away.
It would be a little bit disingenuous to say you can't consume edibles that have marijuana in it, because there's no nexus between eating marijuana and the property value.
You're telling me no matter where I live, I can have the legal amount of marijuana and I can maybe take edibles, or I know there's some oils, that shouldn't be a problem.
That's correct.
But what if you want to cook with marijuana, or maybe its smell is still noticeable in your rental unit without smoking it? I'm told there could be broader terms used in leases banning any, quote, nuisance.
Landlords, if they're trying to prohibit people from engaging in otherwise lawful behavior in their home simply because they don't agree with it, that's a real slippery slope.
For now, attorneys urge potential pot renters to read leases closely and don't be scared to ask your landlord directly. Sparking the flame too soon could leave you homeless.
There is a provision in Michigan that a landlord can terminate with 30 days notice of tenancy, a residential tenancy, and they don't really have to give you any reason.
And I'm told most leases have a section about adding amendments. So even if you don't see anything about marijuana bans, landlords can usually add it in your lease midway through. Of course, none of these restrictions apply if you own your home. You should check out woodtv.com to see what the president of the Rental Property Owners Association had to say about all of this.
Marvis Herring, thank you. You know, a lot of folks have been asking, what does legalized marijuana mean for my workplace? In other words, will your job rethink how they operate in the era of decriminalized marijuana?
24-Hour News 8's Barton Dieters is taking a look at what has happened in other states and what to expect here.
Well, Brian and Marley, the short answer is Proposal 1 does not regulate the drug policies of employers. It still allows employers to prohibit possession or use of marijuana by employees and does not stop them from punishing employees who test positive in drug tests. But the real answer is much more complicated.
It will absolutely force, I think, most employers to go back and look at their policies and at least decide what to do about it.
Luis Avila is a labor and employment partner at Varnum. He specializes in marijuana law. He said employers will have to decide how to conduct themselves in an environment where pot is plentiful and labor is in short supply.
Are those policies something you would never give up for anything, or do you want to be a company that can attract any kind of talent regardless of what people do on the weekend?
But some employers will have no choice because marijuana is still illegal at the federal level. For example, truck drivers are subject to federal Department of Transportation rules, as are many companies and institutions that receive federal funding.
Nonprofits, universities, the health systems here, banks, a lot of organizations that are not going to be able to change their policies because they are still subject to federal requirements.
But others may find they need to rethink zero-tolerance policies if they want to keep their jobs filled. A look at other states that decriminalize marijuana showed that some employers did relax their policies, while others found themselves hiring workers from out of state because they could not fill positions with the local workforce and keep their drug-free workplace.
And we will take an approach where it'll be a case-by-case basis. So if you test positive, why did you test positive? Was it because you received it secondhand at a concert a few days ago, or was it because you were smoking it this morning?
Does your pizza maker need to pass a screening test, or can you test when, you know, they cut pepperoni and their finger?
Employers are moving to a reasonable suspicion standard where if they observe you, if they smell you, if there's reason for them to believe that you might be under the influence at work, they'll probably test you. And I think that's a good standard to follow.
Testing is a cultural thing, you know, and it is, we do it because we've always done it. And it's sort of, you know, we never gave, you know, same-sex benefits to anybody, but now we do.
We reached out to more than 24 of West Michigan's largest employers, and those that cared to respond said they have no plans to change whether or not they currently test employees. In studio, Barton Dieters, 24-Hour News 8.
So it may now be legal for you to smoke pot in Michigan, but driving impaired because of it is not.
Just like you can't have an open alcoholic beverage in a moving car, you can't smoke pot in your vehicle. One of the differences between marijuana and alcohol, though, is with pot, there is no specific blood level where you're legally impaired. Michigan also has no approved method to measure pot in your system on the side of the road. That happens through a blood test once you're arrested and taken to jail. If police can prove impairment and your blood has any THC in it, you're charged with operating under the influence of drugs.
Yeah, if you're going to use marijuana, plan accordingly, just like you would if you're going out to the bar and drinking.
Now, Michigan State Police have finished a pilot test of a roadside saliva swab that is supposed to show the presence of marijuana. They are still putting the data from that test together, though.
Not clear when or if there will be a roadside pot test, though, in the near future. You can head on over to woodtv.com right now, where we've got a lot more information about marijuana in Michigan. We're constantly updating our frequently asked questions portion, helping you easily navigate the new law. 10 states have now legalized recreational marijuana.
So coming up, we're hearing from one of the first voices behind the movement, a key player in writing the very first legalization law.
It took several players to get recreational marijuana on the books in Michigan, but as you know, the movement started long before it got here.
I talked with one of the very first voices to speak out against marijuana prohibition. Brian Vicente co-wrote Colorado's Amendment 64 and now advises several government agencies on marijuana policy. So I asked him about the long and sometimes rocky road to legalization, and if looking back, Michigan could learn from anything he'd have done anything differently.
Michigan benefits from a couple things. One, you've had a robust medical marijuana law with including dispensaries and grows and things like that on your books for a while. Two, you really have the benefit from the other states that have come before you, right? So Colorado legalized marijuana in 2012. Since then, we had, I guess, 8 other states, and now Michigan coming on as a 9th. And so those states have made some mistakes. They've done some things well, and Michigan can kind of take some plays from their playbook and say, you know, what worked well, what didn't, and sort of establish that in its regulatory structure moving forward.
Now, in the first few months after legalization in Colorado, your state did have some very tragic events happen with edibles and people who just did not know exactly or did not do it well in the way they were supposed to in the packaging. You had a few deaths over there. Are there warnings that you would put out to Michigan as we move forward?
Sure. No, I think, the thoughtful implementation of marijuana laws is crucial, and a big part of that is public education. So Colorado did have some somewhat high-profile incidences where individuals would consume a legal marijuana edible, but they didn't really read the label. They didn't know how it would impact them, and then they would harm themselves, right? So to be clear, the marijuana itself didn't cause any, overdose or anything like that, but it was individuals that had adverse reactions to that, and they're sort of taking their own lives or what have you, did occur, right? So it is crucial that Michigan really labels edible products. Your average marijuana consumer doesn't always know how powerful edibles are. They should limit the dosage. They should make sure they stay far away from children and teens. And I think Colorado and a lot of other states have set up examples of how to do that. And Michigan really should do that off from the beginning. When you saw those incidents take place, did you have any regrets? Well, it certainly was tragic. At the same time, if you look at the history of marijuana prohibition and the millions and millions of people that have been jailed for it, and the cartel activity around marijuana when it was a legal substance, I think, the tragic history of marijuana prohibition is much worse than a few incidences. Those are certainly serious nonetheless. So, I'm a parent. I take the issue of marijuana getting into the hands of children and teens very seriously. And I think it's crucial that new states like Michigan really think long and hard about how they can label these products, how they can make sure that packaging is child resistant, how they can do common sense, public education around, this is what edibles do. And this is what will happen, if people who are under 21, purchase them. There will be criminal consequences. Things of that nature are really smart to put a lot of thought into.
It was great to hear a lot of what he had to recommend for Michigan.
Right. And you were just saying off air, Colorado has strived to be a model for the nation when it comes to this kind of thing. And they've been very transparent, even online, with a lot of the statistics, good and bad.
Right. They really have been. They want to make sure that everyone is seeing that they're tracking anything in regards to driving under the influence, right, and children and the impact that marijuana has had on them. They're making sure that other states are able to follow what they're doing and see what's happened.
So much to think about. Recreational marijuana has been legal in Michigan for less than 24 hours, but medical marijuana has been legal for more than a decade.
So for the people who rely on pot for medical reasons and the businesses who distribute it, well, there are mixed feelings about this new law. So we're taking a look at the impact on medical marijuana next.
While recreational use of marijuana just became legal today, medical marijuana has been legal in Michigan for more than 10 years.
And yet there are still kinks with that portion of the law that need to be worked out. So I talked with patients who say getting their medicine can be a task, and they're cautiously optimistic legalizing recreational use will improve access. About 3 years ago, Sarah Ackley-Jasic was diagnosed with gastroparesis.
I was unable to eat for about a year. I lost about 100 pounds and I was severely malnourished.
Sarah had never used marijuana. In fact, she went to school to become a police officer. But with few treatment options, she became desperate.
Especially after months of not being able to eat or stop vomiting, going to things with my children.
She hopes legalization will improve access to her medication, but Sarah and other medical marijuana patients are concerned what's now like going to a pharmacy and getting medical advice will be much different.
I hope that it doesn't just bring more pot shops where it strays away from medicine and into just more of how we have, breweries everywhere and things like that. I would like it to stay where medicine is an option.
With what happened in Colorado, 90% of their business shifted from medicinal to recreational. So it's more of like going into a liquor store.
And will you still have your medical conditions be private?
And that's my concern.
Medical marijuana businesses have concerns of their own.
So what it's going to do is the people who are here are coming to us who don't really need the card for a medical reason will just get it recreationally.
So really then, in a sense, legalizing recreational marijuana could hurt the medical marijuana industry?
Oh, yeah, yep.
Paul Farage owns Sohi in Grand Rapids Easttown neighborhood, a holistic health shop that issues medical marijuana cards.
Well, our business is going to suffer for sure, as far as just medical. But, some of the patients that we have a lot of patients that are over 40 years old, over 50 years old. So we have a fairly large amount of people who are here for legitimate reasons, and they want to stay in the program.
I beat terminal cancer using cannabis. So I'm a huge advocate, and having access to it has been the #1 problem. I'm hopeful that by having recreational, both the costs will go down, that there will be more production.
Could recreational marijuana take away what you need?
Potentially, but I'm hoping that it brings more access because right now Michigan has limited even medicinal access.
Now, patients also blame a poor licensing process for an impending shortage of tested and tracked marijuana. Now that the industry is welcoming in even more buyers, patients worry there won't be a supply of licensing if licensing issues aren't ironed out.
Right, that's a real concern.
Yes, definitely is.
We have more coverage after the break on recreational pot use in Michigan.
We're taking the questions you're asking to a cannabis business attorney next. Now, earlier, some of you joined me on Facebook for a live discussion with Bob Hendricks, a cannabis business attorney in Grand Rapids, to answer some of the most frequently asked questions surrounding legalization. Mr. Hendricks is with us in studio now, and talk about one of the top questions that keep coming up for you.
Well, it is a question that you dealt with earlier in the segment, but many people are very interested about how long this whole process is going to take before recreational marijuana is really a feature of Michigan's world. And I think the answer you gave was absolutely accurate. The Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs has 12 months from today to establish the regulatory framework within which licenses to produce and sell and distribute and transport recreational marijuana will take place. So we're very likely not to see a kind of commercial recreational marijuana marketplace until the spring of 2020.
Exactly. We still have a long way to go. Bob, thank you so much. You'll be sticking around throughout the show, through the end of the show. Join me again on Facebook Live for more questions that have popped up as we've gone on.